Yeah, beyond the pale. I stands as the warnings. They send our sons to war. Yeah, yeah, beyond the pale. Yeah, they sent our sons to war, a cruel charade, a racket built on blood, where fortunes are made. They lie about the reason, spin tales so tall. Our heroes die for profit and empires fall. Politics, a game, a circus of clowns. Puppets on strings, they parade through our towns. They distract and divide us with hate as their tool. Pitting brother against brother in a world they misrule.
When the powers that be warn you not to go beyond the pale,
then that's a sure sign there's more to the tale.
when the powers that be warn you not to go beyond the pale,
Yeah, then that's a short sign there's more to the tale. An anti-human agenda, as plain as the day. They view us as bugs in their cold, heartless play. Eat insects, they sneer while they feast on the land. Depopulation's their goal with the tightening hand. Civil rights torn to shreds in the name of their peace. A police state rises where freedoms all cease. Gaslight us with propaganda, their lies never end. Twisting truth in their grip till our minds start to bend.
when the powers that be warn you not to go beyond the pale,
Then that's a sure sign there's more to the tale.
when the powers that be warn you not to go beyond the pale,
Yeah, then that's a sure sign there's more to the tale. Order out of chaos, their sinister creed. They spark the flames, then offer what we need. Economic stagnation, they choke out our dreams, while divide and conquer rips us at the seams. They fan every fracture, they stoke every fight, left against right, till we're blind to the light. Yet beyond the pale lies the truth they conceal. A world where we're free, where our hearts can still heal.
when the powers that be warn you not to go beyond the pale,
Then that's a sure sign there's more to the tale.
when the powers that be warn you not to go beyond the pale,
Yeah, then that's a sure sign there's more to the tale. So step past their warnings, their fences, their lies. See the world they've been hiding with wide open eyes. Beyond the pale, where the power grows frail, we'll reclaim our future and truth will prevail. Beyond the pale. Yeah, beyond the pale.
when the powers that be warn you not to go beyond the pale,
Then that's a sure sign there's more to the tale.
when the powers that be warn you not to go beyond the pale,
Yeah, that's a sure sign there's more to the tale. Beyond the pale, yeah.
Hey there, Salim. Hi there, Don, and hi there, Matt. Welcome, everybody, to January the 3rd, 2026. I contacted all these gentlemen. I said, you should come on the show, and we'll look at geopolitics in the year 2026, what could be happening and stuff. Well, one thing's happened for sure. Venezuela has just happened. Trump sent in the CIA, and they took out Maduro and his wife and flew him out of the country in a lightning strike, bombed Hugo Chavez's memorial for good measure, just for fun, I guess, and sending a message. I've got my own views on what's happened, but first we will discuss it with our esteemed colleagues here. Salim Mansur, Professor Emeritus of Western Ontario, welcome, and Donald Jeffries, researcher and author of many, many books, including this one, Asking the Truth, How COVID-19 Destroyed Civil Liberties and Shut Down the World. It's a great book, and so you should get it, and you should get all his other books. And Matthew Ehret, of course, also, thank you, risingtidefoundation.net, author of many books and many documentaries that I've been enjoying while while in my downtime in my truck. So thank you, Matthew. First, I guess we'll start with Salim because he's leading off today. So it happened. Donald Trump decided to go after the oil after all because he was complaining how his first administration, they were almost there. They'd almost overthrown the regime and gone after their oil. So now it's happened. So, and to your understanding, what exactly is the state of play in Venezuela right now?
The state of play is right off the bat, I would say, is that now America has established forcefully what it had done in the past, but this is now completely unquestioned in the sense that any country can go into any country. The whole meaning of sovereignty is over, and there is no argument. So if you have the power and the might, you can do whatever you want to do. We are dialing back to 18th century, before 1776, and even going further back in time. There is no international law. It is total lawlessness. It is might is right, and that is the play. Welcome to the third millennium in the 21st century. 1/4 is gone. For 25 years, we have been in an unending war in the Middle East and elsewhere. Children born after 9/11, they know nothing but war. And whole civilization or cultures have been totally bulgarized by the combined Anglo-American media that saturates the world. And I am astounded seeing and reading some of the comments in the social media in Canada and in America that, yes, this needed to be done, that Venezuela is a narco-terrorist state, and this is the way you solve the thing, and this is America first. So, yes, just to start it off.
I could chime in with a thought.
You're muted, RB. I think RB, you're muted.
Oh, that was the problem. Okay.
Yeah, I was. Sorry.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, Matt, you go ahead.
Yeah, no, I tend to be very sympathetic with the words expressed by Salim just there. I think that we have, we've been already to say that there was some form of international law and rules governing the world before this moment would be lying to ourselves. As we know, the U.S. has carried out hundreds of regime change operations throughout the Cold War to the present. And might makes right has been present, even though nice, flowery, virtue signaling words have been used in public settings. It doesn't really tell the tale of how real politics has been projected by and large. And ironically, the Tony Blair liberal imperial doctrine of the R2P protocols announced at the end of the 1990s are really just expressing themselves in a different way here. The idea that, we couldn't, for different reasons, of course, the Blair Fabian language was trying to portray the idea that national sovereignty is an outdated idea because sometimes you just have bad things happening to innocent people, which requires moral governments intervene militarily to save the people, and so we bombed Iraq to save them and to bring in liberty and to save them from authoritarianism. And how nice it would have been if we just internationally intervened into the Rwandan genocide in 94. But we didn't, and so now we can never let that happen again. So now we just have it being done for slightly more or less hypocritical reasons, I suppose. It's for the oil. They're just coming out saying it. It's not to provide liberty necessarily as much as just. But I would say on a higher level of that's the language for the public narratives. But I think that we are seeing a major shift going on, a changing of the elites in a sense that is underway. I don't know if that's necessarily for the better, it might be for the worse in a big way. And I think about a little bit that image that I think by now everybody has probably seen. You guys have probably seen it, right? The map of the North American technate. You guys have seen that?
Yes, I have. I've played it on this show before.
Okay, it's a useful thing because I think that North American technate. Actually, here, you know what? I could just, here. Let me just do a screen share if you don't mind. Can I just do a screen share?
Yeah, good idea.
Okay, yeah, just to make it visceral. So that's the image of what was published in 1933 by Technocracy Incorporated, and that was an agency that had as its Canadian president. Joshua Haldeman, who became the grandfather of Elon Musk, who went to prison. Actually, he was arrested in 1940 for being on the wrong side of World War II. He'd formerly been the head of the Canadian Fabian Society of the Saskatchewan branch that was set up by 5 Rhodes Scholars in 1931, the League of Social Reconstruction. That same Joshua Haldeman, who after doing that and running the Cooperative Commonwealth Federation of Saskatchewan, went on and headed this thing up. And then he became the head of the Social Credit Party before basically abandoning all of it to go to South Africa, where he lived out his days. But as you can see, like the mandate of what they would have achieved if they had gotten what they wanted as a solution to the Great Depression would have been essentially that map, that jurisdiction, which called for taking Greenland, all of North America, Mexico, down to Panama, and even, Venezuela is clearly part of it, upper part of Colombia, Guyana. So what you had is an idea of carving out one of several technates that was supposed to manage the world under a meta-technate. And the idea was to get rid of the political class, get rid of the idea of conventional economics, conventional elected systems. How could I stop this share? I don't think we need this anymore. I don't know how to stop it. Oh, there it is. Okay.
There you go.
And you could read their actual books that they published in their pamphlets of those days. There were many. There was like 500,000 members in California. It was a very surprisingly popular movement, even though it was anything but populist. It had a disdain for people, and it called for the idea that only a scientific managerial class should be deserving of wielding access to the levers of power. So, part of me is thinking today, well, it does seem like we have a move finally being made here at the end of the current system. The preferable shaping of the New World Order would have been probably the more Aldous Huxley, Francis Fukuyama end of history type of plan that was announced back in 1991. I think that would have been their preferred model. Instead, there's many diverse nations and cultures that are no longer willing to go along with the collective suicide and sacrifice of their people and cultures, as was part of the original Francis Fukuyama design. So they've had to, I think, modify some of their programs, get rid of some of their Agenda 2030, programs for the accelerated greening of the earth, the decarbonization strategies that they had been gaming out for many decades. They've had to sort of put that on the back burner for now. Even Carney has gone along with putting aside all of those programs he had devoted years of his life to, building up the climate bankers compacts for decarbonization. He was okay with putting it all on the wayside, letting the bug factories go, and let them just collapse. The biggest bug factory in Europe just went bankrupt. So they're putting them in order to simply, do I think a more Orwellian shift right now, in order not necessarily to be, to provide any actual serious. I'm a little bit more cynical. I don't think that this is an improvement on the Klaus Schwabian approach of the old guard, but I think that it's different, and it's going to look much more like what Elon Musk's grandfather was outlining with Howard Scott and company back in the 30s and 40s, and probably a lot like what South Africa was putting into motion with apartheid. Their apartheid program. If you look at how the apartheid governance structure of South Africa worked, which is where Elon Musk's grandfather went after 1949, and where Peter Thiel was also born. I think that there's a lot of similarities to the type of techno-feudal architecture that they want with local controlled systems, in the transatlantic community. And I think that under a macro structure, I think that what's going on in Venezuela is a part of that realignment.
Well, speaking of Elon Musk, Donald, he's big time in favor of what's going on. Of course, he famously said, "We will coup whoever we want," back in a couple of years ago. And and he wanted to talk about extracting lithium from one of those countries in South America. So, yeah, like Matthew's saying, the technocratic elite, the the multinational corporations, the intelligence networks, Palantir and Peter Thiel, and they're all for this sort of thing because it works for their idea of the New World Order and being run eventually through the Pax Judaica idea. What do you think, Tom?
Yeah, no, I think you're. This is American foreign policy, and it's been this way really since 1898. Really, when we first ventured outside, remember the Maine, we had our first really big psyop, false flag. But and I spoke to you guys before Matthew came on, but this is the exact same thing we saw under Reagan with Ferdinand Marcos. They abducted the U.S. military, took Marcos and his wife, and just I think flew them to Hawaii or something. They were never prosecuted. They just took them away after the election, which he won fair and square. Jimmy Carter and international observers were there, but they couldn't accept the fact that the Filipino people wanted him, and so they, there were lots of rumors Marcos was maybe setting up people's banks, the same kind of things you heard. About Gaddafi later. The same kind of thing. They resented him going around the globalist banking system that they all have, and I think the only countries left that don't have it are Iran and I think Syria, North Korea, maybe in
Venezuela.
And Venezuela too. So just happen to be the ones we're concerned with. It's a mere coincidence, I'm sure, but here you had the same kind of thing. This was supposedly built around drugs, but again, if we had any opposition, and we don't, you saw it when you had the woke Democrats doing this stuff, that the Republicans are the stupid parties, I call them. They're no opposition. They weren't not effective opponents at all. And the Democrats, I don't know what you're going to hear about this. I think you still get a lot of opposition to Trump, but I think it's more on his personality that these people are going to oppose Trump no matter what he did. I don't know how many people on the left are really upset at what he did in terms of intervening, abducting the president of another sovereign nation and bringing him to this country to prosecute. I mean, this is just imagine what would we do if it was a country powerful enough to do this to us? If China or Russia ever got to the point where they could come in and abduct Trump or whoever was president and his wife and just say, we're going to try you in our country. But again, that precedent was set actually back with Adolf Eichmann. You remember the early 60s where they abducted him and took him back to Israel, a country that didn't even exist at the time, and prosecuted him. So this precedent has been set. We've set Nuremberg-style justice after World War II. So anything is fair game at this point. And the idea that, Trump is perceived as a nationalist, a super nationalist, and nationalism revolves around national sovereignty, which I think is a good idea. We should be a sovereign nation so you can control your borders. But you have to have respect for other sovereign nations, and he has no respect for that. I mean, obviously, if he thinks he can just go in and do this, and the notion that the justification for this was narco-terrorism, which is it's an Orwellian term they just made up. It's like, Islamo-fascist. What does it mean? It's ridiculous. It's some kind of code word that, okay, that sounds bad. We can do whatever we want. But if he's concerned about these drugs, why did he just pardon one of the biggest drug dealers just a couple of weeks ago or something?
The Honduran president, the former Honduran president.
Yeah. How does that work? Some drug dealers are more equal than others. I mean, it makes no sense. So there is no moral upper hand here. I don't know how anybody can possibly support what he did. Now they tell us our gas prices will go down, so we'll see. I guess if they go down enough, people will probably applaud it. Hey, cool, gas prices got lower. But it's wrong. We haven't had the moral high ground for a long time. But this is really just another in a series. This is nothing new. It'll be perceived as something a little bit different because of Trump, because of the way he does it and the way his personality is, so divisive. But it's no different than what we've seen for a long time, going back to as Matthew talked about all the regimes we've toppled, all the elections we've interfered with all around the world, since back to the OSS, but certainly since the CIA was created. And just within the last, since the Gulf War period, I mean, and almost always former CIA assets. Noriega, we turned on Noriega and, took him down. We have Saddam Hussein, who was a former CIA, who we supported in the war against Iran and provided that poison gas to that he supposedly used, against that was our poison gas we gave to him. Another CIA asset turned the way, and we ended up killing him. And we cheered when we did it. Gaddafi, Muammar Gaddafi, who was who is despised to such an extent. I think I'm the only one that noticed that they spell his name differently now. It used to be with a Q. Now it's G all the time, and I don't know if they
Right.
just did that to or whatever. And anybody notice it? I noticed it. I saw it spelled with a Q and a K also many times. Suddenly now it's G. But this is a guy who, again, was apparently beloved amongst his people, but he was our asset. We turned on him. They killed him, and you had Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama, these people cheering and bragging about it. We came, we saw he died. And so we don't even try to hide it anymore. So if they had assassinated this guy, Maduro, Trump would have bragged about it. Just like, because now we can do that. It's okay. And you flash backwards how much the world's changed. Back when I was a card-carrying member of the ACLU as a teenager, in 1976, Gerald Ford, of all people, was forced, member of the Warren Commission, was pressured into signing an executive order banning assassination as an American foreign policy tool. So we recognized it was beyond the pale. And polls at that time showed that a majority of Americans would have been against assassinating Hitler, the all-time boogeyman. So people recognize that was a step too far. You don't do that. It's something that we don't do. We have the moral high ground. Look how that has changed. Now, so you flash forward it to less than 40 years later, and Barack Obama, so-called liberal president, is bragging about it. I'm really good at killing people, joking about it. That's where we are now. So we have no moral high ground. And the idea that we can lecture other countries, and this is the problem with our foreign policy, all of it is about lecturing them, that we're better. You hate us for our freedom, and then we take your freedom away from you. So it's horrible. And Thomas Massey is a good guy, but Rand Paul was one of the people that was supposedly against this. And one of my right-wing friends was telling me today there's some kind of list where Rand Paul was one of the people that was recipient of funds from Venezuela. I don't know if that's true or not. I hope not. But it's hard to stay optimistic about anything. I will wait and see, other than people like my friend Cindy Sheehan, Gerald Salente maybe. I don't know who on the left is going to criticize this. We'll see. We'll see if the squad, AOC is busily, demanding more money for Israel like everybody else. I don't know who's out there, because this, don't kid yourself, this has to do with Israel as well. I was talking to my Iranian dentist. I have an Iranian dentist, and he's, we talk politics all the time. He knows he can say whatever he wants to me, and I'm cool with him. My sister married Iranian. But, he was telling me Maduro was very tight with Iran. And I think that's the real reason here. I think this is another way to get to Iran. For whatever reason, Iran's their number one target. And I think that's the main reason you're seeing this here, that they were, is a message to Iran or whatever. But however you look at it, it's a terrible thing. It's another sad day. And we'll see what the reaction is. I haven't, I don't read the New York Times or anything like that, but I'm going to guess that the New York Times approves of this.
Yes,
Probably the
they
Wall
do.
Street Journal.
Yes, they do.
Yeah, there you go. So it's easy to make that prediction.
Yeah, I've been following what's going on. Yeah, I've been following what's going on Twitter and X. Washington Post is all for it. They did an editorial saying this is a great thing. The New York Times is saying Maduro's a dictator, even though he won. He's the legitimate winner of the last election, according to all the international people that went there. Said, yeah, it's a good system, but that organization of South American states that the United States controls through the CIA and through their black budget programs, all saying that he's illegitimate, that actually this other guy was a legitimate victor. Just like, remember when Juan Guaido was brought in, when Trump was the first time, they brought in Juan Guaido, and Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, all the Democrats stood up and applauded this fake president of Venezuela, who was hated in his own country. And Trump just had a press conference saying we're not going to be parachuting in that
Maria Cachado.
Yeah, Maria Cachado, who they did that whole psyop and made-for-TV program where they smuggled her out of the country, and she went and she won the Nobel Peace Prize, and her daughter was over there doing her imitation of the babies in the incubator from Kuwait thing, and it was just a joke. And so deals had to have been cut here, because there's no way. This is my thing. They went in there with this surgical strike. They took out the president and his wife, and they're bringing it back to the United States. They're going to charge him, but I've read the indictment, and the only thing that's they're going to charge him with is having machine guns, 1934 gun law charges. There's nothing to do with drugs, nothing to do with anything else. This is all about oil extraction, as Donald Trump said. He's, we're in the oil business, he said. So deals were made. Salim, I want you to talk about this because you watched the Judge Napolitano programs with those two guys. You'll tell me who they are again, but deals were cut with the Venezuelan military to allow this to happen, right?
Yeah, I mean, the views of the two military guys who I respect, for their inside information and sources.
Ritter and Douglas McGregor.
Scott Ritter, Colonel McGregor. The view that they shared with the judge was that this would not have happened the way it happened unless the ground was well prepared, and the preparing of the ground was buying off the people around Maduro, with hundreds of millions of dollars. And so they knew exactly where he was, and they could just walk in and take him out. Of course, there is mud on the face of both Russia and China on this matter. But I don't think, again, there's a fog of war around all of this. I don't think the Chinese and the Russian, Putin or Xi Jinping, anticipated that this would happen in the manner it happened. They knew that something is going to happen, but not that Maduro would be in a position where he would surrender. But the build up to this is, there are a lot of rogue actors around the world, including the people who sit in the Oval Office. If there is the Don Corleone of rogue actors in the world, then it is the person who occupies the Oval Office. And there's bipartisanship, and the bipartisanship since at least 1945 is being engineered by the surrender of Truman to the Zionist lobby, completely. And that gradually has extended to the point that of the 535 men elected to the Congress, 435 in the House, 100 in the Senate, you only have just a couple who are still independent and not bought over, right? Thomas Massey, Senator Rand Paul, maybe Senator Ron Johnson from Wyoming, possibly Marjorie Taylor Greene, who is now stepping down. So there you have it. You have the Zionist lobby, the State of Israel, who have basically, the 2%, less than 2% non-Irish. I love it, Dawn, your description. I have to use it more often. Less than 2% non-Irish have bought over and control completely the government policy of the United States. And so one cannot discount the fact that this happened with Benjamin Netanyahu in Washington, Netanyahu in closet discussion in Mar-a-Lago with Donald Trump. So the other question that you might want to address: who runs American foreign policy? Does it Washington, or is it Jerusalem? Long before this happened, I think it was soon after the woman won the Nobel Prize. The name is escaping me right now. Yeah, she said that if she becomes the head of the leader of Venezuela, one of the first thing, if not the first thing that she would do, would be to establish diplomatic relationship with Israel and send in a Venezuelan ambassador. That would be the first thing that would be done. So the first thing that is going to be done anywhere that is connected with America is through Jerusalem. Jerusalem recognizes Somaliland. Jerusalem, has established the whole idea of decapitating.
Don't you mean Tel Aviv, actually?
Well, it is Jerusalem. That is what Donald Trump did, right? It goes against international law, and so on and so forth. But the other thing that we need to focus in on, or at least I'll put it on the table, is the importance of oil in the sense of where it stands, not only in terms of energy need around the world. It is about whether America is going to be able to keep going for the next whatever period of time. The king dollar in possession, that it will be the reserve currency of the world, and that is very rapidly, or not rapidly enough maybe, but it is coming down, and the target is brick nation. The target is to destroy any possibility of challenge to the king dollar. And how do you, in the very short term, that is within a matter of 6 months or so, deal with this interest payment that is coming up due on the $40 trillion deficit debt, which is about $2 trillion a year interest on it, when major countries, China, Japan, South Korea, Indonesia, Malaysia, are basically selling off their treasury, U.S. Treasury bills. They're unloading that pretty much, and that has all sorts of impact on the big plans of AI and so on, and at least keep sustaining the American economy as it is, at least until November 2026. And so Venezuela oil was very critical. It is, 300 billion barrel. It is the largest known reserve in the world. So if you just take 300 billion barrel, and at $100 a barrel, let's hypothesize, at $100 a barrel, at 300 billion barrel, that amounts to $30 trillion. That immediately, that becomes the collateral of Trump against the deficit that takes care of 75% of the deficit. That
Let's
is
let's hear
that
what Trump.
of the urgency, apart from sending the message to Iran and all the other Gulf state, oil producing state.
I
The
think you're Salim, and this is Trump's own words. This is from his Mar-a-Lago press conference.
But in terms of other countries that want oil, we're in the oil business. We're going to sell it to them. We're not going to say we're not going to give it to them. In other words, we'll be selling oil probably in much larger doses because they couldn't produce very much because their infrastructure was so bad. So we'll be selling large amounts of oil to other countries, many of whom are using it now, but I would say many more will come.
but the
So
point
what's
here
going
is,
on? He's taken over Venezuela's oil production. He's going to sell Venezuela's oil to other countries. American oil companies are going to go in there like scavengers, like vultures, and they're going to be on top. And none of that money is going to be going to the United States people. It's going to the
well,
multinational corporations.
RB, that's not the point. I mean, we can talk about the oligarchy and the rest of the world, the 1%, the 2% non-Irish in population term in America. But in the shortest term, it is, I mean, Trump had made this point. I mean, his Commerce Secretary Lutnick has made this point, that these would be the collaterals, that will belongs to the United States, against which the deficit, the debt, and other things would be calculated. So
Won't they
with
just print more money?
with $300 billion oil in the ground in Venezuela, 300 billion barrel oil in the grounds in Venezuela is now American oil. That's just a flip, and it will be in the American, listing of its assets against the debt. It's like taking a mortgage on your house or on whatever other asset you have, and building upon that. So this is the message. This is established now. Unless it can be reversed. So there are a lot of pieces that is floating around it. Um, the whole idea that you have seen in the last, what is it now, running into 3 years, the genocide. Nobody wants to talk about the genocide that is in the media and everything. It is everything else but a genocide. But the genocide has washed out the entire post-World War I arrangement that the Anglo-American power, Anglo-American French power had constructed in the Arab lands of the Ottoman Empire. The Mexico Agreement, Sykes-Picot Agreement and all of that. That has all been wiped out. That structure has gone, and that is the objective of the Israelis. Those will be the Israeli asset, just as they took over Syria. And so this game has now implications of what the rest of the world is going to respond. They saw Libya, they saw other
Yeah.
situation, but Venezuela, I think, was the tipping point, and the question now hangs: is there a response, and what will be the credible response?
Okay, well, we're talking about cutting deals. I think China was cut in on this deal about a day before this happened, or actually hours before this happened. A Chinese delegation went over to Venezuela, and they were talking about making infrastructure deals. But anyway, this is just happened. It's just out on X. This is breaking. The U.S. and I want Matthew to talk about this. The U.S. Navy makes way for Chinese vessels in Venezuela. The Chinese oil tanker Wan Xianhu is currently on its return voyage from Venezuela and has entered international waters in the Caribbean Sea. It is being escorted by the Chinese Navy warship Lizhu, heading toward the Atlantic Ocean. The Lizhu is a Type 054A gilded missile frigate of the Chinese Navy and is part of the PLA Southern Theater Command. Based on its normal cruising speed, the tanker is expected to reach China in about 25 days. The Wan Chunhu departed on December 25th, 2025 from the port of Maracaibo, Venezuela, after loading approximately 2 million barrels of crude oil. China's Navy operating long-distance escort missions as far as South Africa is actually quite straightforward. On one hand, circumstances make escorting unavoidable. On the other hand, it is an inevitable requirement as China's global interests expand. China has built such a massive naval force that reclaiming Taiwan would be more than sufficient in capability, but we are unwilling to turn weapons against our Taiwanese compatriots. However, protecting global interests and conducting trade backed by strength is essential. There's also another very important point. The number of Chinese naval vessels has now surpassed that of the U.S. Navy. If the Chinese Navy wants to secure greater defense budget support in the future, it naturally needs to demonstrate its capabilities. The Americans are allowing the Chinese to continue to export oil from China, not from Venezuela. And I think that there was a deal cut. What do you think, Matt?
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good hypothesis. Sorry, my camera's a little weird here. I suspect there's a lot of clues to work with. I'm on the one hand trying to make the argument that China is not going to have the moral authority, legal or otherwise, to take Taiwan is really going to be tough to maintain at this point. It was already pretty unpalatable, but now it's really forget about it. So I think I don't see that this is a long-term agreement, but I do think that certain deals were cut behind the scenes. I sense that there's been a bit of a Yalta 2 approach to sort of reviving that old, Congress of Vienna, 1815, spheres of influence approach to trying to. I mean, that's basically Orwell's Oceania, East Asia, Eurasia. That was basically his particular 20th century understanding of what a new Congress of Vienna type of realignment of world powers would look like. We lost RB. Where's RB?
I'm still here. Don't worry. I just took my face off for a while.
Okay. All right. So I don't think it's very sustainable. I think it's a short-term set of agreements that shouldn't be trusted in the long term, but I think a certain space has been given, and not everybody is on board with this in any measure. I mean, many of those institutional powers that have enjoyed doing whatever they wanted to do for the past many decades are not going to easily just give up their old script as a new script is being hoisted upon them. On the other hand, I think that as I said, the reason why they've had to jettison that older script of the Fukuyama New World Order idea of just getting a straight one world government and no nation states under a homogenous, rainbow fascism, that idea that maybe they were still holding on to a few years ago, that's increasingly gone because of China saying no, they don't want to go along with that. They've built up strategically productive power and a cultural, I would say a moral cultural superiority to anything we see in our desert wasteland of morality is in terms of the culture. If I look at the shows, the movies, the types of messaging that I locate within the art forms, the CIA funded art forms that are being fed into the psyche in the West, and I compare that to the type of shows and moral values that are contained philosophically embedded within the art and entertainment of China, by and large. I mean, there's garbage in China, but by and large, it's infinitely superior morally. And there's a Confucian revival. There's sort of a recapturing of their Confucian traditions that are being really, really pushed to be made cool. And so reading the classics is becoming something that young people want to do. That's a state policy. In Russia too, there's a certain very, very sacred idea of capturing the best moral attributes of their civilization, their Christian civilization, and that's a healthy thing. There's many problems in Russia too. Don't get me wrong, right? There's problems in China. There's problems in Russia, but overall, there's something viable that makes them not want to self-sabotage and self-sacrifice at this altar of depopulation of Gaia. And so, they've had to go to this other thing. And I do think that that faction currently in play around Trump, that's less advanced in their attainment of power in Europe, but they're there. It's bubbling. You can see it within various European countries. It's bubbling. I think it will likely grow as things get much, much worse in Europe, and they will. They're making deals, and I think that the oligarchy would prefer that humanity organize ourselves around game theory. They don't like the idea of win-win cooperation. This type of thinking that the U.S. used to do in its better days before it slid into imperial insanity. The U.S. had a tradition that many have forgotten, was premised around the notion of, doing good for the future, both domestically, but also helping other nations develop their own means of producing, having industry. This is what JFK was tapping into when he was working with Kwame Nkrumah and had a plan for the industrial development of Africa.
And that's what China is doing now. China is now taking that role. They're the ones that they're not taking over other countries by force, making trade deals with them. They're building up their industries, and they're trying to get a quid pro quo through that. But at the same time, you have to realize this, China has a big hold over us here in the West, because simply if they stop this trans-Pacific trade, we would not have, who's going to fill our Walmarts and our Home Depots? We've sold off our industrial base over to China. And famously, a few months ago, you remember when the U.S., when Trump announced all these tariffs on China, within 2 days, the Fortune 500 bigwig gave him a call and said, stop that, because we need China. We sent, they're our good. They make our goods. They make our production possible. So this whole idea that China would just sit by and let what's going on in Venezuela doing it without taking a cut, I think we have to start thinking about that. What do you think, Don?
Well, I'm no expert on that, but yeah, I would imagine so. The Chinese are very smart, and I just think this is, this entire thing is so sad, because we're discussing foreign policy, we're discussing the rest of the world, and it's the antithesis of America first. The entire idea is America first, and this has nothing to do with America, no matter how they try to paint it. Once again, this is what he did today. He did it differently than Bush might have done it, more dramatically. But it's the same thing as a Bush or Biden or Obama, any of these presidents would have done. Clinton, going back to Clinton bombing Yugoslavia constantly, Kosovo, and everything. And so all the presidents have done it. This is our foreign policy. It's bipartisan. There can be no debate. That's why my friend Cindy Sheehan is no longer welcome with the Democratic Party, because she was a peace mom. She lost her son, and but once Obama was elected, she didn't drink the Kool-Aid. She saw, well, he's still bombing all these countries. He's still doing the same thing, and all her liberal Hollywood friends she made, she wasn't invited to the parties anymore, and now she has to talk to the likes of me, noted thought criminals. It's that's what happens when you oppose war. We had to face the fact that, unfortunately, the majority of the American people are in favor of war. They like toughness. They like strength. They like the parades. There's no parades for peace. Smedley Butler remains popular, but nobody listens to what he said. Nobody. I mean, he told you. Wars are about opportunities for profits. They're not about enemies. The last soldier of World War I, Harry Patch, when he died, England, he said, war is organized murder and nothing else. And that's a great definition. That's the guy that was there. And at the time, everybody thought it was very poignant, but they forget, and they're ready for the next war. Venezuela represented no threat to us at all, but then neither did Vietnam, neither did Kuwait, Iraq. None of these, anybody Afghanistan, just name your country. I mean, it's one thing after another. There's no interest the United States has in any of these countries at all. We should be taking care of our own interests first. So I just resent the fact that our political dialogue is taken up with this. And there's wars in Iraq. It absolutely always has been. And I don't know he died before World War II. So I would be interested to see what he would have said there. He probably would have destroyed his reputation by being against that, I guess. But this is a shame because unfortunately the America First has been slandered now and associated with Nazism, which is ridiculous. So you're not going to get any more candidates. I don't think they're going to talk about that. But the fact that Trump has done what he's done, I don't know what I always said. Where does it go after Trump? We'll see what the response to this is. I think most of the alt media will be against it, but I think it'll break down on what you're seeing with the Charlie Kirk. It would break down along Zionist lines. Alex Jones is supporting it, which is again just repudiates anything he ever said. I'm sure Tim Pool will probably like it. But Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson will criticize it, and that's the breakdown between the alt media. And but I don't know. The next hope there may be Tucker Carlson. Maybe he'll run for president.
Hey, Salim, what do you think is going to happen in Venezuela? Okay, so you're Douglas McGregor and Scott Ritter talked about the military in Venezuela being paid off to allow this to happen. But the vice president of the country has just come out and condemned what's going on. And there might be enough people in Venezuela that are opposing this. They've been demonstrating against this. Do you think they're just going to stand by and allow America to come in and take over everything and just start running the country for them without a government being formed? Or do you think there could be a possibility of a major civil war going on in Venezuela? What unintended consequences here?
All of those possibilities are up in the air. I mean, something will have to gel and come together. What Scott and Colonel was saying is that basically the way this particular operation took place had to be one in which the grounds had to be cleared up around Maduro. That doesn't mean the entire, what's the population? 38 million, 40 million people are going to just lay back and surrender. Remember, I mean, all of these various types of regime change post 1945 that America has engaged in. Let's take Iran. I mean, Mossadegh was an elected leader, and he was demonized and overthrown and later killed or died in prison. I'm not quite sure what exactly happened. My memory is fading away on me these days, but that happened in 1952, 53. 26 years later, the revenge came. The same thing take about Vietnam. I mean, the day after JFK was murdered, LBJ changed the memorandum that JFK had signed, the last memorandum about the lead into the withdrawal from Vietnam, the first 1,000 to be taken out by December 31st, 1964. And then after the election, he would pull out the remaining. And LBJ turned it around. And then with the Gulf of Tonkin resolution, the Vietnam War escalated American presence on the ground to almost 500,000, right? But then the turnaround came. April, whatever date it was, April 4th, April 15th, 1975, when the last Americans with the ambassador, Martin, boarding the helicopter and flying away from Saigon, right? So these things will happen. I mean, it is not that, we have to cook it up. It will happen because there is going to be resistance. There is going to be struggle. The whole issue of narco terrorism was as fake as weapon of mass destruction in the case of Iraq. Um, but what I am concerned, in more ways than one, in the longer term, is that if this sticks through for you know a decade or so, this sort of policy, and there is no response to it from the other powers that is rising, this means the continuing impoverishment of the global south. They will be forced into, again, position of neocolonialism, satellite state. And so you can see that. I mean, that's what Trump is trying to do with India now. I mean, India has to follow the sanction, and not buy oil from whatever discount from Russia and then sell it to the rest of the world, or those who are willing to buy from India, and so on and so forth. uh, that impoverishment, that neocolonialism, that's the dial back. And it is not only the global south that is being impoverished, it is people in North America, people in the middle class and, lower class. It's again back to the 2% non-Irish. And that's the taboo subject that we don't want to talk about. But it is staring in our face. They are the one, along with the American, and this I'll stop. Um, the build up to international law was a slow process. We can go all the way back to Grotius and others, and Immanuel Kant, and so on and so forth. After the birth of the nation state idea, after the 200-year long religious wars in Europe, and the making of the nation state, um, a slow process that came together in 1919 with the League of Nations, which America did not join. And then in the Second World War, after the Atlantic Charter, it was the Americans, it was FDR and his people drafted the UN Charter. So when people talk about today, and this is what needs to be hammered home, when people talk about rules based order, the whole world signed on to what America drafted and ratified in 1945. That is the UN system of the rule based order. There cannot be any international law outside the UN based rule of international law unless the rest of the world come together on this. This rule based order is nothing but old colonial imperial rule. And the question is from where and how the resistance will be mounted to bring America into some sort of discipline. In 1945, America agreed to be monitored within this UN based system. And then, of course, 1776 and 1789, it is America that started out laying down the ground rules of a constitutional republic, not a constitutional democracy, a constitutional republic, you know, and all of that has been erased, trashed, abused, and set aside by Americans. Trump is only the latest incarnation of that ugly face before 1776 and what the world was. I think this is not what is being grasped by the people, including American, in fact, most importantly, Americans.
What do you think, Matt?
Yeah, I mean it's not looking great. I was really disappointed in the recent reinstallation of the Albert Pike statue. I don't know if you guys caught that.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, of all the statues they tore down, they made sure they put Albert Pike back up. I mean, that's sending a message.
Yeah, they tore down Frederick Douglass's statue. They didn't put that back up.
Nope.
Frederick Douglass they didn't put back up, but they put back Albert Pike. And I think it's revealing because Pike's statue itself, I was looking into the background of it. It was originally installed in 1902. And it was installed, that was one of the first things that Teddy Roosevelt did when he became president. is he oversaw and gave approval to the installation of the Albert Pike statue in the first place. And I think that was kind of a symbolic manifesto to what the Teddy Roosevelt corollary was as a statement for those who knew what Albert Pike represented, because he wasn't just the KKK founder and he wasn't just the Scottish Rite Grandmaster. He was also a Confederate general. He was a leader of the Order of the Golden Circle, the Empire of the Golden Circle clans that had like 80,000 paramilitary members.
And they were involved in Abraham Lincoln's assassination.
Absolutely. Yep. And it seems like they just kind of were rebranded the same way the organization Consul was rebranded into the paramilitary branch of the Nazi Party in 1923 when they were banned in Germany. They didn't disappear. All of their membership just kind of like put on slightly different colored uniforms and became the vanguard for the Nazi Party after they got caught killing too many, political leaders who were trying to flank this clear design for the destruction of Germany and the setting the stage for what became World War II. And you had people like Walter Rathenau, the foreign minister of Germany, working with to set up the Rapallo Accords with his Russian counterparts, Checherin and others in Russia, who were basically saying like, yeah, let's just get rid of the Versailles debt repayments. Let's cancel it, and we'll go for a pro-industrial cooperative policy where we're going to work together. Harding was giving his support to this that bypassed the League of Nations agenda that was being pushed by the city of London and these Wall Street bankers that wanted to get rid of the nation state even back then. And these leaders who were largely dying way before their time were all flanking it by reinstating the power or reasserting the power of a healthy idea of the nation state as premised around the concept of cooperating with your neighbors. It's the idea of the healthy good neighbor policy of FDR. That nationalism isn't based upon something that is in any way compatible with fascism. It's premised on an idea not of just simply isolationism, but of both taking care of your people at the same time that you recognize that your self-interest is located in the well-being of all of your neighbors at the same time. It's the Peace of Westphalia. It's the first article in the Peace of Westphalia that we are going to premise this idea of sovereign nation states around the benefit of the other. That's the first article. Just like in the League of Nations, right? The first article, or the UN, the charter that's different from the League of Nations, is premised on the enshrinement of the sovereign nation state as an immutable principle. But it's not that it's premised on the concept that we all have to work together and live together and find ways of building a future together. So that's what Teddy Roosevelt was absolutely against when he took that idea of internationalism and turned it into his big stick diplomacy thing with his corollary. Because he actually hated, I think, him or whoever controlled Teddy Roosevelt, which is what it seems the language and the ideology around the Trump corollary to the U.S. foreign policy recently announced is really based upon a revival of that coincides with the revival of the Pike statue. It was based on I think, ironically, something that masquerades as nationalism, but it isn't. Because if you think about it, the Monroe Doctrine, as outlined by John Quincy Adams, of which the Teddy Roosevelt corollary was an abomination, it was premised, if you read John Quincy Adams' concept of the nation state, it was a community of principle that we are going to establish ourselves in such a manner that we will ensure that foreign oligarchical intrigues are going to be kept out of the Americas. Okay. But at the same time, he had a concept, a spirit of wanting to help everybody within the Americas to access mutual development, the best quality science infrastructure. That's, and that had to go. And so this is the sort of thing that I'm very worried about when I see symbolic things like the Pike statue reinstated. And there does seem to be an effort to take MAGA, which has viability. Like the only thing viable that I could see in America is located within the MAGA movement. But then there is an effort, it seems, by subtle but very powerful social engineers to nudge the conservative right towards reactionary fascism. There is a movement to do that. There's I have to write a book right now called Why Real Patriots Don't Think Like Hitler. I'm going to publish this thing in about 3 weeks. I shouldn't have to write that book, but I have to write that book because so many of people who read my stuff are becoming really convinced that Hitler was a great guy. And that's not happening by accident.
Yesterday, when I was driving my truck and I was at a roadside stop, and I decided to throw I took my garbage out of my truck and I threw it away in one of those truck stop trash bins that are you have to put your hand in to open it up to keep the bears out. And as I was throwing my trash away, when I opened up the lid, there was a advertisement for Europa. You have to watch Europa, that apologism for Adolf Hitler and Nazism. And so it's everywhere. I mean, and that reactionary is coming. And look, but the thing is, you can't look what's going. This happened on January 1st, 2026. A neo-fascist march to celebrate the birthday of Stepan Bandera, who was a mass murderer and collaborator of Hitler's Third Reich, took place in Lviv, Ukraine on January 1st, 2026. While the ultra-nationalist ideology has been unacceptable to the majority of Ukrainians, the far-right groups are being actively funded by Western actors and used as a tool of hybrid warfare against Russia in Ukraine and against Russian-speaking Ukrainians. Zelensky's regime is not only normalizing the legacy of fascist factions who aided Hitler militarily during World War II, such as the OAUN-UPA, but it is also reviving the once marginal ideology to prepare the Ukrainian society and younger generations for more proxy wars in Russia. Let's just watch 17 seconds of this. Parade for Nazi ideology happening right now in Ukraine. These are the people we are supporting with our tax dollars. Openly marching in the streets for Nazi ideology happening right now. That's who we're supporting against the Russians. What do you think, Don? Is that a good idea? What we should be doing?
You know, most I would say probably 75% of my 12,000 some subscribers on Substack like Hitler, to love Hitler. And I don't write about him very much. It's I think what's happening is that young people especially are being drawn to him. And I think it's because they look at the other side is the established side. We say who so-called won the war. And, you know, the more we learn, I've written a lot about FDR, I've written a lot about Churchill, and, you know, Harry Truman, on down the line. And we see that this kind of Cold War establishment we saw was so bad and was so crooked and so corrupt. And what, you know, Rise of the Fourth Reich, there you Jim Mars, yeah. And if you read, you know, I've tried to tell some of the people that love Hitler that read me that read Wall Street and the Rise of Hitler by Professor Anthony Sutton, which is a really good examination of the, you know, Hitler was not a rabble rouser that just, you know, that doesn't happen organically. I don't know that it can, where, you know, he rose from nothing. I mean, obviously somebody was behind him. This needs to be somebody behind everybody, every world figure. And, but I think they look at him as kind of a, you know, he lost, and especially it's wrapped up in the power of Zionism today. What was Hitler talking about? Juden. He was talking about the Jews, and so many of the, I mean, it's amazing the sentiment out there. And this, you know, when you have people like Mark Levin, Ben Shapiro, and these kind of, and all our politicians, Donald Trump, you see how subservient they are to Israel, how they're lapdogs, and it plays into that belief.
It's almost like it's being done by design. It's almost like they want this to happen.
Yes, yes, exactly. And so that's why, you know, Salim refers to non-Irish. I get tired of saying Jew over and over again when I'm writing, so I call them the non-Irish, and I think it's a kinder, gentler way of referring to it. But it's, you know, this is, I think, the basic question. And again, I don't think Hitler was legitimate, but I think more and more people are looking at that because they understood how bad, they understand about what the Allies did. They know about the bombing of Dresden, where he killed 39,000 toddlers alone. They know about Operation Keelhaul after the war, which was run by Eisenhower. Yeah, and so they know about our own concentration camps that we had. You know, I wrote an
Operation Paperclip.
Yeah, Operation Paperclip, exactly. So what happens at the end of the war? You know, we had, how many people died to stop Hitler and stop the Nazis? But as soon as the war was over, we engineered Operation Paperclip, where we brought a bunch of them, including Werner von Braun, who was, you know, behind NASA. For those people have their doubts about that. You know, I think it's corrupt and, you know, fake and everything. I've studied it a lot. So people understand that. And then as soon as the war was over, here we were, Uncle Joe Stalin was our ally. And then as soon as the war's over, suddenly Churchill talks about a steel curtain that has come down, and so you have the Cold War. So, Bob Dylan wrote a great song about God on their side, where he talked about now the Russians now too have God on the Germans now too have God on their side. So I think young people especially are looking at this and they don't understand. And all they can do is look at what's happening in today's world, where if you criticize Israel at all, or you talk about power of the disproportionate power of the Jews, you get in trouble. You get canceled. So they look back and they say, well, yeah, Hitler was talking a lot about the Jews. Look what happened to him. And so I think that that's what that's about. Well, of course, Hitler or any other figure, I tell people all the time, because when they want to talk about the Holocaust or anything like that, I say, look, we're lied to about everything. I don't think that they tell the truth about anything in history. So I write about hidden history, and I've read 3 volumes of it, and I'm hoping to find one day some historical event they told the truth about. I haven't found it yet. I mean, all you gotta do is look and scratch the surface a little bit. You see, all the inconvenient deaths, the destroyed evidence. It's always the same story. They lie about everything. So, of course, it's natural for people that have that mindset to say, well, they obviously lied about World War II. Now, I am in the position, I don't think that means that Hitler was the good guy and we just got it wrong. I mean, they did lie about it, but I don't think we can make any kind of uh, even, understanding about that. I mean, they're still lying about Hitler
No.
dying. We have tons of evidence that he went to Argentina and
Yeah.
lived for a long time, but they still have to insist on this myth that he killed himself. So I don't know, but Hitler, it is what it is, and he's become almost a romanticized figure among the young people. And
Just a quick one to throw in there. The thing I like throwing at people is that Hitler was also a Zionist.
Yes, he was.
If you look at it, right, I love that irony, right? Because the Havara Agreement was entirely what made the state of Israel possible in the first place, and that's why you had many leading Nazis studying Hebrew so that they could practice Kabbalah, and that was their idea of solving the Jewish problem, was getting them all to go into fulfill the anyway.
Yeah, that is very true. The Havara Agreement. They even struck a medal. On one side was the Star of David, on the other side was the swastika. They struck a medal to celebrate the occasion, and so. But of course, it was only the rich, well-off Jews that got to leave Germany for the Holy Land because they could afford to. But all the poor Jews, the ones that had nothing to do with Zionism and nothing to do with any of this, were the ones that were thrown into the Holocaust. They were the sacrificial lamb to make sure that the state of Israel had a moral imperative to exist. It's unbelievable how evil it was. What do you think, Salim? I want to share this.
I just want to point out in your chat room, see, you already have, there's some of the hearers. I can tell by the question to me, Greg Hume, look and see what books were burned by the Nazis. Pornography. I mean, Hitler he may have more fans than any American politician today. If you what I read, at least people that consume alt media.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this is just in Israeli cybersecurity billionaire Shlomo Kramer says it's time to limit the First Amendment. We need to control all the social platforms and take control of what they are saying. Here we go, in their own words. I mean, this guy is a walking, talking representation of anti-Semitism. I mean, it's like they want it. They're not hiding it anymore. This is what they're going to do.
I know it's difficult to hear, but it's time to limit the First Amendment in order to protect it and quickly before it's too late.
What do you mean?
I mean that we need to control the platforms, all the social platforms. We need to stack rank the authenticity of every person that expresses themselves online and take control over what they are saying based on that ranking.
The government.
So they're saying it right out loud. I mean, and he's not the only one. Netanyahu, of course, is saying it famously. Came over and he's talking about buying off all the platforms. I mean, on one hand, it's anti-Semitic to say that all these Zionist Jews are control the media and everything. But on the other hand, they're doing it. They're openly buying.
Exactly.
I mean, it's unbelievable. What do you think, Matt?
Agreed.
Why is it unbelievable?
Okay, so
why RB it is unbelievable. I know it's rhetoric. Look, I just pulled out 2 books from my back shelf. I don't know. I'm sure Matthew knows this. Zionism in the Age of Dictators by Lenny Brenner.
I haven't read that. No.
Lenny Brenner was a Jew. I mean, he was writing this in the 1930s. Zionism and the Age of Dictators.
Hmm.
And of course, Anthony Sutton's classic 3-volume work about Wall Street, and here's the Wall Street and the Rise of Hitler. The whole lot of them, the Bush family and others were deeply, deeply invested in Hitler and the Third Reich.
Wow.
Just as a subtext or a footnote to my friend Dawn's observation talking about the young people. I mean, Candace Owen, if I recollect correctly, when she learned about what the Bolsheviks did in murdering Christians in Russia, that was her Rubicon. She flipped. 60 million Russians died between 1917 and the end of the war, 1945, and the bulk of that were Christians killed deliberately by the Bolsheviks. Among the current polemics, I mean, not only current, but has been going on all my life. That I've been in Canada, that is almost half a century and more. Any discussion from the Arab Muslim side about what happened in the Second World War and the role of the Muslims, I mean, people have forgotten that the Jews of Europe, they found shelter and refuge among the Muslim society, the majority Muslim state. I mean, Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia.
Yeah, people have to. I want to quickly say that people have to remember that during the Inquisition that was going on in Spain.
That was
Yeah, a
500
lot.
years ago. But I'm talking about, this century right here. That's not
Okay.
our grandparents' time, My wife is from Algeria. I know I've been to all those various kasbah, they're called it, That is the for lack of a better word, ghetto, where different ethnicity lived. And so the Jewish kasbah in the capital, Algiers. So there they were protected. I mean, after all, the most beloved movie of that period, considered one of the top 5 or 10 movies, is Casablanca.
Yes.
I went to Rick Cafe in Casablanca just to honor Humphrey Bogart and Ingrid Bergman. I
Good
love
job,
Ingrid
Steve.
Bergman, I mean, to me, Casablanca without Ingrid Bergman would be no Casablanca.
I am shocked. I am shocked that there's gambling going on in here. Shocked, I say.
Exactly. And so in any discussion, my Jewish brothers and sisters would throw up, Oh, the greatest evil face of the Arab during that period was Mufti Amin al-Husseini, who sat with Hitler. And nobody will talk about that Benjamin Netanyahu's father was carrying the briefcase for the secretary of Jabotinsky, who was, the closest pal of Mussolini. I mean, this is the state of understanding history, knowledge, whatever you want to call it. And unless North Americans open up really and examine that phase of history, America is already gone under. I don't know how much under it will go to the 2% Irish. The crown jewel of the Bill of Rights will be gone. First Amendment, you just played it out. I've been talking to my friends about this. And what else? Anybody who says anything about the Zionists would be not only committing hate crime, it will be a capital crime. Look,
Well, if the First Amendment goes, all the other amendments follow.
Exactly.
That's why it's the First Amendment.
Look, the whole idea of the Untermenschen and Übermenschen, the Aryans and the non-Aryans, where did this come from? The chosen people, and the Gentile and the Goyim. And when Rabbi Abraham Cook, the elder, who was the chief rabbi of the British Mandate of Palestine, was explaining what this means, he said the difference between the soul of the Jews and the soul of the non-Jews, the Gentile, is so vast, so deep, the chasm is so great. It is as if, to understand, the soul of the Jews are human, and the soul of the Goyim, the Gentile, the non-Jews, are of that of cattle.
Yeah.
I mean,
Okay. we've been going for like an hour and 14 minutes yet. We're going to wrap it up. We're going to go around starting with Matt and Don and Salim. Let's give a wrap up to what you think is going to be coming with this geopolitical crisis in 2026, focusing, of course, on Venezuela, Ukraine, and the Middle East. They're all interconnected, and what the global South, the BRICS nations like China and Russia and Brazil and South Africa, are they? What's their pushback going to be? Are they just going to sit back and make some deals and try to keep their head down, or is there going to be some kind of confrontation? What do you think, Matthew?
I mean, I'm weary. You know, I know a lot of people were celebrating how great a job Iran did at their last, you know, during the last 12-day war, whatever the hell that was with Israel. But I wasn't happy with that. I don't think anybody sane was happy with how Iran fared. I mean, a big chunk of their most qualified leadership was wiped out. You know, over 30 extremely qualified generals were killed earlier last year. You know, the assassination of Raisi was a big deal, their defense minister as well, on the border of Azerbaijan. And I think that there's a certain naivete. I think there's been a lack of preparation for the type of evil that is coming on. I'm worried about, you know, places in South Africa has been targeted, you know, Nigeria. There's narrative signaling that's been put out to prepare, I think, the zeitgeist for an idea of some form of U.S. military intervention into those places to defend either white people getting genocided or defend Christians who are getting genocided. Whatever the spin is, it's accommodating a certain psyche of people who would otherwise be horrified by the idea of supporting more war. Like the people who, that's the tragedy that hurts my heart, is that so many of the people who are being duped into championing this new, you know, version 2 Teddy Roosevelt corollary were themselves, they appeared as a movement in response to their disgust of the U.S.'s behavior in bombing countries that had nothing to do with 9/11 and not caring about their people first. And now I'm seeing a shift based on certain hypnotic inductions that are being coordinated across even especially alt media spaces that are becoming increasingly the new mainstream media. It's, you know, like I appreciate a lot of the truths that Tucker can put out there, but at the same measure, you know, he's got 20 times more viewers than CNN at its prime time, and there's still a lot of toxic stuff that I can identify as being CIA originated propaganda being infused even out of those domains, you know? So I'm worried that the periphery that there's going to be, I mean, it seems clear enough that there has been an agreement reached for at least the short-term period to allow perhaps China in the coming year to take Taiwan, and maybe the US will back off. Perhaps that's been agreed upon. Maybe they'll back off on the Ukraine front too, perhaps. I don't know how the Europeans are dealing with that psychologically. They're not doing well with that idea, it seems. But maybe that's been put in place, you know, in favor of the idea that we'll have little jurisdictions now. But it's not something you should trust. And I think the efforts to destabilize the contours of Russia, especially the contours of China and their allies, Cambodia, Thailand, many other, Nepal, there's a lot of evidence of an acceleration of chaos, so that their ability to have the stability of their supply lines will not be there, will be removed from them as they become more and more dependent on things that are ultimately controlled by the US, where then the US can hold more sway over China to say, hey, well, yeah, we'll let you have the oil from Venezuela. We'll let you have it, but you have to do certain things now. Or we'll let you have, you know, certain rare earths from Nigeria, but now you have to do certain things. So I'm worried that they're putting China in a corner. So that's a concern. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's greater 5D chess planning by the multipolar alliance intelligentsia that I hope is out there. I hope, but I don't know. I don't know that.
What do you think, Don? Wrap it up.
Well, I think that, you know, and you're talking about China, all I know about China is what I've heard over the years. How it's a totalitarian society, and you know, it certainly wouldn't want to have that here. But so many readers that I have that from all around the world have lived in China or been in China, and every one of them tell me they had more freedom in China than they have here. They all talked about how great it is now. It's like, I said, I don't know. I don't know what to think about that. And again, we're being lied to all the time. So who knows? All I can do is judge what we see in Washington, D.C., and see within our country. And I don't like the way that's going. And I think it all revolves around Zionism. Without Zionism, which is indefensible, and you saw when Ted Cruz tried to debate Tucker Carlson, it cannot be defended. You've seen Candace Owens has ripped several rabbis to shreds debating them. They can't debate her because the facts aren't on their side. Common sense isn't on their side. If you take away the supposed threat of radical Islam, which I don't think is a threat, and I think it's largely created by Al Qaeda and all that, then you have what you have. You have genocide in the Middle East. You have this troublesome state that always appears to be looking for war with its neighbors that we keep giving money to, and we're constantly preoccupied with that instead of looking at without that, then we could concentrate on what we have at home. Because everybody understands that we shouldn't have people living in tents in the street, crapping in the streets, and empty buildings everywhere. I mean, you had leaders with any kind of common sense, they could come up with some kind of a scheme to put all the people that need shelter into those homeless buildings that they can't lease. Some cases haven't leased for years. But we don't have that because we'd also talk about an infrastructure that hasn't been touched for 60 years. Trump doesn't talk about it anymore. He did. Instead, we're constantly preoccupied with these boogeymen, and they all revolve around these foreign hobgoblins that H.L. Mencken talked about. They all revolve around the interests of Israel. So if we can finally, and I'm have hope because so many young people, so many people in the alt media, led by a lot of black podcasters like Candace Owens, the Hodge twins, Jason Whitlock, they're openly talking about this where white guys never would. Now they're being emboldened. Tucker Carlson's talking more and more about it. So I think this is a good thing because it can't stand up to debate. Otherwise, it just becomes Mark Levin and Ben Shapiro just shouting anti-Semite. That's all they have. It cannot stand up to debate. Why should we be giving you money and with what you're doing to kill a bunch of people? Why are we doing that? It comes down to that. Why don't we save that money and do something here to improve the lives of the American people? And so I'm hopeful that will continue. I don't think they can sell it. That's why I think, frankly, we haven't seen World War III yet. I don't think they could sell it. And thanks to the conditioning, RFK Jr. said that 70% of young people of draft age, if they had burned out of draft, are physically, mentally, or emotionally unstable. They couldn't, in other words, they couldn't take them. They can't field an army, and they know it. And that's why it's this constant fear porn. And so I had all this talk about World War III. I don't think you're going to see World War III. I hope not, anyhow. But we have to keep fighting what Alex Jones rightly called the info war. Unfortunately, he seems to be on the wrong side of the info war now in terms of Zionism. But that's all we can do. And I have hope that maybe we can do it.
Well, that's great. And Salim, building on what Don says, I have hope too, and that's great that people finally wake up to this racist ideology of Zionism and how it affects people. But at the same time, I caution against people turning to this idea, and this is what this book is basically about: is that the American government is poised to become the new Nazi Germany.
Yep.
And that's what I'm worried about. What do you think, Salim? To wrap it up.
Well, I share to a lot what Matthew has talked about. I'm concerned about everything that, in that sense, that Matthew has said. The BRIC countries, including Russia and China, have not really thought through how they're going to build and go forward, given what they are facing right now, which is now completely unmasked. I'm old enough to remember very distinctly in 1972 bombing of Hanoi, Christmas Day and Christmas Eve, and it was done with the broadcast, the madman theory of Nixon, and he was going to bomb the hell out of Hanoi and all the ages and towns and cities and villages, and he did. But then what happened? 3 years later, it all fell apart. 75 was the last ambassador leaving Saigon. So what I see that parallel, people keep talking about history doesn't repeat itself. Maybe it rhymes, whatever it is. I come from Indian origin, background, and culture. There is a karmic a resolution to everything that we do. And I think the karma is playing out, and it is playing out and simultaneously with the effort on the part of whether it's a madman's theory or this man. Trump is truly a madman in the sense, a pedophile and sex trafficking and all of that is bubbling up, and he cannot stamp it down. How many Maduras he kidnap and bring them to Southern District of New York to put on trial. That fact is coming up. So all of this is converging, and I think this transition period is going to be very tough. This transition period that we're going through, maybe 3 years, maybe 5 years, maybe even faster. And there's going to be a lot of wreckage, as Adam Smith once told his students. There's a lot of ruin in the life of a nation. um, and so we have to be worried about that, that it doesn't blow up in our face. And I think that's what Putin and Xi Jinping are very carefully navigating through. That you don't push a mad dog, a madman, further to the precipice and faster to the precipice, what he might do in between. So that is happening also. But the key structure of the American society, in terms of its constitution, in terms of its work ethics, in terms of morality, that is the core values of America that built America in the 20th century, second half of the 20th century, particularly before the collapse of the Soviet Union, has been more or less trashed by the elite. How much of it remains in the people? I listen to Don and I read him more carefully because he has the inner pulse of it. From the outside, I see that America has become exactly what T.S. Eliot had talked about in The Wasteland, and the elite of America are hollow men with their head full of what was the word that Eliot used? I forget now, but trash, basically. So that downfall is happening, and it cannot be reversed, just as it happened with Great Britain. The speed with which Britain at the end of the war, 1945, lost its empire was astounding. How quickly India was vacated, and then everything else like domino effect came through, and within 10 years there was no British empire. I see that picture playing out. I see the BRIC nation with all the mistake, the trials and errors coming together. This Donald corollary to Monroe Doctrine is the last fling. How many more will be victim is another question. I don't know, but by November 2026 election, we'll have a much better feel of how we have survived and come through this period.
Well, thank you very much, Salim. Thank you, Matthew. Thank you, Don. I ran all your scrolls while you were talking. You can find them.
Thank
You can Google them and you'll find everything. The Rising Tide Foundation for Matthew Ehret, Salim Mansur. Follow him on X. And Facebook if you want, even though Facebook is basically I don't trust it anymore. And Don, of course, you can just Google his name and get any of his books. American Memory Hole, Bullyocracy, so many others. You'll learn a lot through following Don's, and follow him on his Substack, Don Jeffries at Substack. So thank you everybody for showing up. My wife is calling me. I can smell what she's cooking, basically. So
Okay.
thank you, Salim. Thank you, Matthew.
See you guys later. Take care.
Until next time, and there will be a next
Lovely
time.
to be together.
Yeah, it was a pleasure.
Take care.
Thank you so much.
Thanks,
Thank
bye.
you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Well, thank you for tuning in tonight. It's been great. Learned a lot. A lot to chew on, a lot to think about, because what's coming is what we're living through is like one of those turning tides of history. I think Stalin, Lenin maybe said that for decades nothing happens, and then within a couple of days, decades happen, and I think we're at that point now. Thank you, Linda Craig. Thank you, Greg Hume. Thank you, everybody in the chat. And Stoop Sign, thanks for showing up. Stoop Sign, love you guys. And Stoop Sign, I have had due dissidents on my show. I've had my very, very biggest podcast was when I had Keenan and Russell on my show, my very first season. I think it was show number 9 or 10, and it was a great time. And Russell hasn't reappeared, but Keenan has made 2 guest appearances since. And I do try to. They're so busy. They got their own show going, and they're subbing for Jimmy Dore now. So here's old Jimmy Dore. I got his T-shirt there. I went to a couple of his shows. Great guy, and Jimmy was kind of the guy that spurred me to do this, because I have a lot to say, I have a lot to talk about, but I do want everybody to think very, very, very seriously about this. That there's going to be a reaction to what's going on, but you have to make sure that you don't get caught up in an overreaction. That's exactly what they want. Remember, they divide us by the left-right paradigm. They try to make us hate our neighbor, and it's not our neighbor who we should be worried about. It's the guys up above that are running everything, these oligarchs and these global elitists who really don't care about us and view us as useless eaters. So let's keep our focus on the real threat here. And remember, conventional wisdom is simply conventional deception. If you really want to know the truth, you'll have to go beyond the pale. Thank you, guys. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.
They send our sons to war, a cruel charade, a racket built on blood, where fortunes are made. They lie about the reasons, spin tales so tall, while heroes die for profit and empires fall. Politics a game, a circus of clowns, puppets on strings. They parade through our towns. They distract and divide us with hate as their tool, pitting brother against brother in a world they misrule. When the powers that be warn you not to go beyond the pale, then that's a sure sign more to the tale. Their anti-human agenda, it's plain as the day. They view us as bugs in their cold, heartless play. Eat insects, they sneer, while they feast on the land. Depopulation's their goal, with a tightening hand. Civil rights torn to shreds in the name of their peace. A police state rises where freedom all cease. Gaslight us with propaganda, their lies never end, twisting truth in their grip till our minds start to bend. When the powers that be warn you not to go beyond the pale, then that's a sure sign there's more to the tale. Order out of chaos, their sinister creed. They spark the flames, then offer what we need. Economic stagnation, they choke out our dreams, while divide and conquer rips us at the seams. They fan every fracture, they stoke every fight, left against right, till we're blind to the light. Yet beyond their pale eyes, the truth they conceal, a world where we're free, where our hearts can still heal. When the powers that be warn you not to go beyond the pale, then that's a sure sign there's more to the tale. So step past their warnings, their fences, their lies. See the world they've been hiding with wide open eyes. Beyond the pale where their power grows frail, we'll reclaim our future and truth will prevail.